The more you review, the faster you will learn German. A true fact, absolutely, but how would you say this sentence auf Deutsch? For this, you would need to use the conjunctions je, desto. Je, desto, which is in English this de. And that's exactly what you will learn in this video. Die Doppelkonjunktion je, desto is used to express a comparison. And before we do some examples, let's first look at the grammar. Die Grammatik. We start with a very, very simple sentence. Je schneller, desto besser. Je schneller, desto besser. The faster, the better. For example, in the office, you ask your boss, Chef, wann muss die Arbeit fertig sein? When does the work has to be finished? And he or she answers, je schneller, desto besser. The faster, the better. Now keep in mind, this sentence here, das ist gesprochene Sprache. That's spoken language. Because as you can see here, there is no subject, there is no verb, so this is not actually a complete sentence, this is a shortened form. But you will hear it in spoken language quite often. But now the grammar. We have here two adjectives, schnell und gut. And they are both used im Komparativ, schneller und besser. And that's exactly the first important part when it comes to grammar. This je and desto, they're always followed by an adjective im Komparativ. Now, let's make a complete sentence, an official correct sentence. Zum Beispiel, je früher du buchst, desto billiger ist der Flug. Je früher du buchst, desto billiger ist der Flug. The earlier you book, the cheaper the flight is going to be, or the cheaper the flight ticket is going to be. Now here as well, we have two adjectives im Komparativ. Früh, früher im Komparativ und billig, billiger im Komparativ. This is the first part. Now the second part, which is important in terms of grammar, this je, the conjunction je, introduces a Nebensatz, a subordinate clause, which means the conjugated verb here, buchst, is at the end of the sentence. And this desto always introduces a Hauptsatz, a main clause. Now to summarize this, here the two options. First, je plus Adjektiv, Komma, desto plus Adjektiv. And don't forget, always Adjektiv im Komparativ. Always, always. And the second part, je plus Adjektiv, and then a subordinate clause, ein Nebensatz, Komma, desto plus Adjektiv und ein Hauptsatz. Let's look at the sentence structure, der Satzbau. And we take the same kind of sentences, these two, but another one here, which is also commonly used in spoken language. Je früher, desto besser. Je früher, desto besser. The earlier, the better. Also in office, you probably will hear this a lot. Auf Position 1 ist je, die Konjunktion je, dann Position 2, das Adjektiv im Komparativ früher, dann Komma. Desto is Position 0, you will see it just in a second why, and then also the adjective im Komparativ. So let's do a complete and official sentence. Zum Beispiel, je älter ich werde, desto weniger schlafe ich. Je älter ich werde, desto weniger schlafe ich. Absolutely, unfortunately, also a true fact. Now here as well, Position 1 je, dann 2 ist das Adjektiv, dann 3 ist das Subjekt und 4, or just important, the last position of this subordinate clause of this Nebensatz ist das konjugierte Verb. And then Komma, then desto, Position 0, weniger, Position 1, das Adjektiv und dann das konjugierte Verb auf Position 2, schlafe, and then the subject. So most important in terms of sentence structure is these two things. So first you start with this je. You cannot start with desto. You have to start with je. And then right after this je, there is the adjective im Komparativ. And then, Komma, desto, And then right away, right afterwards, there is also the adjective im Komparativ. And the second thing is, again, je introduces a subordinate clause, desto introduces a main clause. Now this number 2 here, this sentence number 2, which is the official, the correct sentence, is kind of the most basic structure you will find. In the example sentences, just in a second, we will do a little bit more complicated ones, weitere Varianten. But before we do the example sentences, just this little quick. This je desto oder je umso, you will see both, and they both are exactly the same thing. So instead of saying je desto, you can also say je umso. They're both correct, both official German. You can use whatever you want. In this video, we just use je desto. Why? Because I think it's more commonly used. Beispiele. And we start again with a simple one, and the one from the beginning. The more you review, the faster you will learn German. Auf Deutsch, je mehr du wiederholst, desto schneller lernst du Deutsch. Je mehr du wiederholst, desto schneller lernst du Deutsch. Ein anderes Beispiel, auch sehr einfach. Je mehr man isst, desto dicker wird man. Je mehr man isst, desto dicker wird man. The more you eat, and this man is just you, people, the more people eat, the fatter they get, or fatter you will get. Oder je größer die Wohnung ist, desto höher ist die Miete. Je größer die Wohnung ist, desto höher ist die Miete. The bigger the apartment, the higher the rent. Now let's get a little bit more complicated, and we do Beispiele mit trennbaren Verben, separable verbs. Je früher ich aufstehe, desto länger ist mein Tag. Je früher ich aufstehe, desto länger ist mein Tag. The earlier I get up, the longer is my day. And here we have aufstehen, which is a separable verb, but it's not separated. Why? Because je introduces a subordinate clause, and separable verbs in a subordinate clause are not separated. But you can also put it, of course, in the desto Teil. For example, je mehr Geld Diego verdient, desto mehr gibt aus. Je mehr Geld, actually you can drop this Geld because it's, according to the context, it's clear what we talk about. Verdienen is earn, ausgeben is spend. Je mehr Diego verdient, desto mehr gibt aus. The more Diego earns, the more he spends. And here we have the separable verb ausgeben, ein trennbares Verb, and it is separated because it's used in the main clause. Modalverben. Let's do some examples with modal verbs. Je länger du bleiben kannst, desto schneller werden wir fertig. Je länger du bleiben kannst, desto schneller werden wir fertig. The longer you can stay, the faster or the quicker we will be finished. And let's put the modal verb in the desto part. Je jünger der Hund ist, desto häufiger möchte spielen. Je jünger der Hund ist, desto häufiger möchte spielen. The younger the dog, the more often he would like or he wants to play. So literally, the younger the dog is, the more often would like he to play. And now some examples with Präpositionen. Je mehr du über das Thema sprichst, desto langweiliger wird es. Je mehr du über das Thema sprichst, desto langweiliger wird es. The more you talk about this topic, the more boring it gets. Of course, not when talking about this topic, right? Anderes Beispiel. Je später du kommst, desto länger müssen wir auf dich warten. Je später du kommst, desto länger müssen wir auf dich warten. The later you come, or the later you arrive, the longer we have to wait for you. Warten auf, Verb plus Präposition. Reflexive Verben. Beispiel, je mehr Sport ich mache, desto gesünder fühle ich mich. Je mehr Sport ich mache, desto gesünder fühle ich mich. The more sports I do, the healthier I feel. Or, reflexive verb in the je part, je mehr du dich beeilst, desto früher können wir anfangen. Je mehr du dich beeilst, desto früher können wir anfangen. The more you hurry up, the earlier we can start. Sich beeilen, reflexives Verb, and means to hurry. Now, je and desto, they are conjunctions, which means they have absolutely nothing to do with cases. Accusative, dative, whatever, they don't impact anything of the cases. And they can be used in any tense, present, future, or Vergangenheit, past tense. Here's some examples for Vergangenheit. Je mehr die Gäste getrunken haben, we talk about alcohol, desto lauter wurde es im Raum. The more the guests drank alcohol, the louder it got in the room. Oder, je schneller du gesprochen hast, desto weniger habe ich verstanden. Oder desto weniger habe ich dich verstanden. Je schneller du gesprochen hast, desto weniger habe ich dich verstanden. The faster you talked, the less I understood you, or the less I could understand you. Now this sentence here is actually quite useful, the last one, maybe not in past tense, but in present tense, in terms of situation you don't understand what the German person is saying, or it's just too fast, and you don't want to say always this, wie bitte, Entschuldigung, zu schnell. If you want to say it in a nicer way, you can just say, je schneller du sprichst, desto weniger verstehe ich. The faster you talk, the less I understand. Also bitte sprich langsamer. Please speak slower. Bonustipp. Adjektivdeklination. Declension of adjectives. Your favorite topic, I know. What is it again? Wenn vor dem Nomen ein Adjektiv steht, muss das Adjektiv dekliniert werden. If you have a noun and right in front of this noun is an adjective, so there's no article, nothing in between, then you have to decline the adjective, which means you have to change its endings. Zum Beispiel ein neuer Computer oder die leckere Pizza oder die alten Bücher. As you can see here in yellow, always the adjective endings, which do change according to the noun, according to its case, number, and gender. 3 things you have to consider. Now, when talking about je desto, these conjunctions, then you have to use the adjective im Komparativ. And this means you also have to decline the adjective, to change its endings if you have this situation when you have the adjective and right afterwards a noun. So in Komparativ would look, for example, like this, ein besserer Laptop oder die frischere Frucht oder die älteren Häuser. Here we see the adjective is in comparative, besser, frischer, älter, and the adjective endings also change according to gender, number, and case. Exactly the same. The endings are exactly the same. They follow the same rule. They follow the Adjektivdeklination. Now, this is actually not the tip yet. This is just to tell you, okay, in Komparativ, you also have this Adjektivdeklination. Tipp Nummer 1. Tipp Nummer 1 is for this example. Je mehr Dinge du kaufst, desto weniger Geld kannst du sparen. Je mehr Dinge du kaufst, desto weniger Geld kannst du sparen. The more things you buy, the less money you can save. Here we see je, then mehr, and then Dinge. So right afterwards there is a noun and it's in plural, Dinge. Desto weniger Geld. Geld is uncountable, but it's also right a noun. But here is important, this mehr and this weniger. They are very common used in terms of je and desto. So we'll see this, you saw it in the examples before already. This mehr and weniger is probably the most common words when you build desto, je, desto sentences. But these two, mehr and weniger, they do not change their endings, which is a good thing, right? So there is no ending. It doesn't matter if what case, number, whatever the noun is right afterwards, they do not change its endings. Why? Because actually here they're used as adverbs and not as adjectives. That's a detail. It's just important to keep in mind whenever you use mehr oder weniger, the noun, with a noun right afterwards, you don't have to care about Adjektivdeklination. But for all the other adjectives, you do have to care. So, for example, this sentence here. Je höhere Steuern die Bürger bezahlen, desto schönere Parks kann die Stadt bauen. Je höhere Steuern die Bürger bezahlen, desto schönere Parks kann die Stadt bauen. The higher taxes the citizens have to pay, the more beautiful parks the city can build. And here die Stadt is actually referring to die Regierung, the government. We often use this term Stadt when we talk about the government. So the government builds those parks. And here you can see, je höhere Steuern, there we have adjective im Komparativ, höher, we have the endings, you have to decline it according to the noun, which comes right afterwards, which is Steuern. And schönere as well, because afterwards there is this parks. So if you come across sentences like this, where you have the adjective im Komparativ and then right afterwards a noun, and it's a je desto sentence, keep in mind, in most cases, you will only see uncountable nouns or nouns in the plural form in je desto sentences. So like here, for example, in my example here, Steuern und Parks is plural form. Uncountable nouns is like, for example, Geld or Luft, air, or any kind of materials. And if you think, Adjektivdeklination, maybe now it's a good time to review it, watch this playlist here. 5 videos about Adjektivdeklination in all cases, and the last video is about the system behind it. I hope you learned something. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen, tschüss und bye bye.